The crystal city gleamed in the sunlight. The capital of the planet Quadria was said to be one of the most beautiful places in the known galaxy, and so far it didn't disappoint. The planet had 4 suns, the largest not too different from Sol, but the other 3 were white dwarfs whose light added a bluish tint to every one of the thousands of dazzling crystals. As they were escorted through the city by their Quadrian guards, the 4 humans could only stare like slack-jawed tourists. "Just remember, I worked really hard to get us an audience with the Emperor. Remember to be on your absolute best behavior." "You've said that 100 times already, Travis. We're professional explorers. We know how to behave around aliens." "Hakwa zot ida," one of their Quadrian guards said, and there was a moment's delay before his translator caught up. "Don't step on the windows." "Oops, sorry." There were crystal windows embedded in the street, providing light to the sub-street levels. The native inhabitants walked around them, seemingly without thinking about it. "I mean it, Pierce. Even for an emperor, this guy is not someone you screw around with. Quadria had been in a civil war for a century. No side could get the upper hand. Then Jorian the First showed up, and within a few years the whole planet bowed to him. If we want to get off Quadria, we need to go through him, and he is not someone you just walk up to and ask for a favor. So let me do the talking. Reese, Haskell, you both clear on that?" The 2 other men in their party nodded. They'd been blown off course by solar storms while they were charting deep space well beyond any human outpost. They'd been lucky to make it to Quadria, but they'd been stuck here for 2 years at this point, trying to find a way to repair their ship. Pierce had pestered local officials for ages, in the hope that a meeting with the Emperor could get them what they needed to fix their ship and go home. He'd neglected to mention beforehand exactly what kind of ruler Emperor Jorian was, however. They might have tried harder to think of another way to get what they needed if he'd mentioned the planet-conquering tyrant bit. The 4 humans had survived a series of adventures since they'd landed on the planet, and all the locals they'd met agreed that if they wanted to get home again, the Emperor was the only one who could help them. Tyrant or not, he was certainly popular with his people. From the way people talked, the Emperor was the smartest person on the planet, as well as being brave, honorable, wise, strong, impossible to deceive, and so on and so forth. In short, they thought all 4 suns shined out of his rear end. If he even half lived up to the hype, he should be able to send them home just by snapping his fingers. They were escorted into the palace, which was no less glittery than the rest of the city. At first they were left in an antechamber, guards looking at them suspiciously and totally ignoring Travis's attempts to engage them in conversation. One of them even pointedly switched his translator off. Then, finally, it was time for the audience. The throne room could have doubled as an aircraft hangar, albeit one that put the Hall of Mirrors at Versailles to shame in its sheer opulence. Pierce, Travis, Reese, and Haskell found themselves bunching up as they were marched down the hall. If the point of the monumental space was to make supplicants feel small, it certainly worked. Finally they reached the front, and the guards just left them there, which was unexpected. Then, when the door closed, the curtain that had been partitioning the front of the room began to draw back. No wonder the Emperor didn't feel like he needed guards. The throne was huge, but the Quadrian sitting in it was even bigger. He towered. He loomed. He looked down on the 4 humans, and in a thunderous voice that ran all the way down their spines, he said, "I am Jorian, the great and powerful. Kneel and avert your gaze." Without needing any further encouragement, the humans dropped to their knees. "Who are you?" Pierce started. "Well, we're explorers. I'm Pierce, and this is Travis, Reese, and Haskell, and we're humans from the planet Earth, and we were wondering if—" "Silence!" Pierce's mouth slammed shut. "I know where you're from. I am the Emperor. I know all and see all." "Well, then why did you bother asking?" Travis muttered. Pierce punched him in the arm as subtly as possible. Fortunately, the Emperor didn't appear to notice and carried on regardless. "I also know what you want. To be sent back to your miserable, dreary little planet." Yes, please, Your Majesty." "Why should I help you?" "Well, Pierce began, but before he could continue, Travis interrupted him. "Sorry, excuse me, could I just ask a question?" He stepped in front of Pierce. "Why are you speaking English?" "What?" "Well, You're the first person we've met on Quadria who speaks English, and I'm just wondering why that is. I'm using a translation device. No, you're not. The translators have a slight delay and you can hear the original Quadrian underneath. You're speaking English. I am the Emperor. Your simple language is no challenge for my intellect. Travis, what the hell are you doing? Pierce snapped. Are you trying to get us executed? Give me a moment. I think I'm onto something. Travis whispered back. He was looking at the Emperor with a curious expression on his face. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a couple of boiled sweets which were popular in certain regions of Quadria. Pierce looked at him incredulously. Then he chucked the candy at the Emperor. Pierce's mouth dropped, but he was even more surprised when the confectionery went straight through the giant sitting on the throne. I knew it, Travis shouted. It's a hologram. Hey, thou shalt not throw candy at the Emperor. You might as well come out. We know you're there. Come on, where are you? Travis climbed up onto the dais and started looking around off to the sides, then disappeared behind the curtains. Aha, there you are. Pay no attention to the man behind the Oh, crap! Travis reappeared, dragging a short, slightly portly, and very human man out from the wings of the stage. The man had a headset on, and when he moved his head, the Emperor on the throne followed his movements. Get your hands off me! Guards! Guards! Hey! The man squeaked as Travis ripped the headset off him. All right, fine, you got me. You can stop yanking my arm. Haskell started. Does anyone want to explain what's going on? Do you want to introduce yourself properly this time, Your Majesty? Travis asked. Well, I guess. The man sighed. Hi, everyone. My name's Joe Ryan. Nice to meet you. There was a slight upward inflection in that last sentence that indicated he was very much not sure which way this encounter was going to go. No, seriously, what the hell is going on? Pierce asked. Where's the Emperor? Oh, that's me, Joe said. I'm Emperor Jorian, Sovereign of Quadria, Prince Regnant of the Moons Gatrix and Sorn, Overlord of the Colonies, Grand Justice of the Eternal Court, etc., etc. Reese gawped at him. But you're human. Yes, well, I try not to let that hold me back, said Joe a little sheepishly. Why all the song and dance with the hologram and all that? Asked Travis. Well, I was afraid you'd try and take me back to Earth. In fact, that's really why I invited you here. I've been keeping an eye on you for a while. I was hoping you'd figure out a way to get off Quadria yourselves, but it's been 2 years, and you somehow still hadn't figured out how to get home. I didn't want to meet you just in case, well, this happened. That's why I sent the guards out, in case you noticed something was off and said something. But I was getting worried someone from Earth would come looking for you and figure out what I've been doing. Pierce folded his arms. You mean how you've been masquerading as the Quadrian's Emperor in violation of any number of non-interference directives set down by the Union? Yeah, pretty much. I was afraid a rescue party would try to take me back. Well, they probably would, said Pierce. For good reason. I mean, I can't even begin to imagine the amount of damage you've done here interfering in their culture like this. Hey, it's not like the Quadrians are a bunch of backward savages, you know, said Joe, a little offended on his people's behalf. Their culture can survive one human getting involved. Also, I've been doing my best to help them. Well, you can present that defense at your trial, said Travis. Come on, you're going to take us to a ship and then you're coming with us, and if you make any trouble, we'll expose your scam to the Quadrians. No, you can't do that. Well, then get us out of here quickly and quietly. They left the throne room via a door behind the dais. Joe led them up through the palace, heading for the shuttle pad on the roof. He promised that from there he could get them to a ship with interstellar capabilities. They were almost there when they heard a shout behind them. Kar Khan! Khan Oka! Followed after a moment's delay by the translated version. That's them! Get them! Suddenly there were palace guards swarming down the corridor towards them, led by a Quadrian in a purple robe. They tried to make a run for it, but they got round the next corner and ran straight into another group of guards. They were surrounded. We surrender! We surrender! Reese yelled, as bayonet-tipped plasma rifles were pointed at their faces. Azako Dahara! The Quadrian in the purple robe demanded, and the translator barked, Release the Emperor! Hey, Zoroff, Joe whispered to him. No mentioning the whole emperor thing in front of the boys, remember? He looked pointedly at the palace guard. They already know. The purple-robed quadrian, Zoroff, answered, switching to atrociously accented English. They do? It was becoming inconvenient to maintain the pretense, so for the past few years we have been broadening the circle of awareness in preparation for a general reveal to the public. You have? The final timetable for the general announcement would of course have been your decision, Emperor, but we wanted to show you that the people would accept your true form, so we decided to conduct a limited trial. Currently, we are on Phase 4, palace guards, palace staff, administrative staff in the capital, and all members of the imperial government across the planet with clearance of magenta or above have been informed. So far, results have been positive. Oh, good. And you didn't tell me? Until the general announcement is made, it's a matter of civil service management rather than government policy. You had more important things to concern yourself with. As you can see, it has not affected the running of the government in any way. Right. Still, you should probably have given me a heads up. I apologize, Emperor, Zoroff said, bowing deeply. Well, no harm done, I suppose. Anyway, let's... Sorry, can I just butt in here, said Travis. You knew he was scamming you and you just let him continue. All right, said Joe. I suppose it's time for a proper explanation. Let's go somewhere a little more comfortable, shall we? He said, looking around at the heavily armed guards pointing guns at the 4 bemused humans. A few minutes later, they were in the Emperor's office, which was a considerably more intimate setting than the throne room, although that could be said about basically any enclosed space. There were still a lot of guards about, eyeing Pierce, Travis, Reese, and Haskell suspiciously, but at least they weren't actually pointing their weapons at them anymore. You can't take our Emperor, said Zoroff emphatically. Okay, Haskell began, but you know, he's really not meant to be here. We need him. Right. Why? Zoroff looked to Joe as if asking for his permission, but Joe shook his head. It's my story. I should be the one to tell it. He sat down across from the explorers and sighed. It started 20 years ago. I crash-landed here. You probably got caught in the same solar storms I did. Except I wasn't an explorer so much as I've been a bit of everything in my time. Long story short, I needed a fresh start, so I struck out for the edge of known space. And when I landed here, they'd been at war for a century all across the planet. It was a time of great suffering, Zoroff interjected solemnly. Right, I certainly saw enough of that as I was traveling around. I was one of the few people who could pass between the different states, and nowhere was safe for long, so I just kept moving. And eventually, I figured out that everyone was sick of the war and were just looking for a way out, so I decided to give it to them. The biggest challenge was getting all the big players to actually come together and talk. He employed many outrageous lies and ingenious trickery, Zoroff added. I don't know about ingenious, but I certainly bullshitted a hell of a lot. I wasn't much good at fighting, but I know how to bluff my way out of a tight situation. Once I'd got representatives from all the warring powers together, I told them that they were all as exhausted as each other. None of them could conquer the others, but if they made peace, then they wouldn't have to worry about getting attacked again. Everyone would just be happy the war was over, and I really hoped that would be enough to get them to stop the fighting. Unfortunately, we are a stubborn people, Zoroff said. After a century of bloody conflict, none of the different governments could tell their people it had all been for nothing. The war could only end 2 ways, total victory or total destruction. And I'd be afraid they might say that, so I had a backup plan. I'd already tricked them into attending the peace conference, so I made them an offer. What if I helped them trick their respective factions into thinking they'd lost the war? Fair and square? A defeat that didn't really lose them anything. It might not be the victory they'd been hoping for, but none of them could get that now, and it would at least stop the killing. They broadly agreed that at this point, their people would accept the war's end if it was presented as a fait accompli, but they didn't see how it could be done. So I introduced them to the character of Jorian, the master strategist, general, statesman, conqueror, etc. We were incredulous at first, Zoroff continued. But the Emperor provided a plan that was surprisingly easy to carry out. Forces were told to retreat from armies that were always just over the horizon. In battle, it is common for soldiers to not even see the enemy they are fighting anyway. Artillery units from other states were ordered to bombard the positions that had just been vacated without knowing why, in order to maintain the illusion. All of this could be done with the collusion of only a few of the senior officers. The weakest states withdrew their troops towards their capitals on the pretense that they were about to be overrun by Jorian's forces. Always, it was another unit that was engaged and wiped out, units that had already been lost months earlier, which raised no question since military losses were routinely concealed. Catastrophic defeats were announced that never took place. The common soldiers considered themselves fortunate when their states surrendered without having to face Jorian's forces personally. Then, after the first few states surrendered, their troops were combined into my Imperial Army. Joe smiled. Which suited them fine, because after a century of bloody stalemate, they were finally winning battles, without even having to fight much. Better to have easy victories for the Imperial cause than get their limbs blown off serving whatever faction they'd been fighting for before. The remaining states pulled the same trick, withdrawing their armies as if their entire front was collapsing under enemy pressure, while really they were hardly losing anyone. For once they were lying about how many men had survived, rather than how many had died. I'm not much of a soldier, but I have been in a few wars, and it's the same across the galaxy. The average grunt rarely knows what's going on outside his own dugout, and that was it. Without one real battle, I'd conquered the whole planet, and I was now Emperor Jorian. Of course, I was only supposed to be the figurehead. The plan originally presented to us envisaged a post-war government made up of a council of representatives from the warring states, Zoroff explained. The Emperor's role was only to announce our decisions to the public, passing them off as his own for the sake of maintaining the illusion. However, the war caused much bitterness. The council members tried to work with each other first, but we quickly became deadlocked by petty squabbles and old recriminations. In the period of reconstruction after the war, Quadria desperately needed a functioning government. So I just sort of ended up doing the job for real, Joe shrugged. And you did a better job of it than we ever would have, said Zoroff. Well, I don't know about that. I try to follow advice from the council as much as possible, which is more than any of us would have done. A Quadrian in your position would have taken counsel only from members of his own faction, if he did so at all. You listen to all opinions before making a decision, and you originate many valuable ideas of your own. Quadria has prospered greatly under your rule. We would never have recovered from the war so quickly if you had not taken the reins of government. Zoroff turned to the four explorers, which is why you cannot be permitted to take him. Well, super interesting story, said Pierce, but it is still kind of very against the law for him to be doing this. Also, your planet is fixed now. Why do you still want to be ruled by a con artist? Because I fear what would happen were he not here. Oh, come on, Zoroff, Joe said. The council manages a lot of the day-to-day stuff already at this point. We've even got democratic institutions at a local level. I'm sure you could manage on your own at this point. The council is obedient to the wishes of the Emperor, said Zoroff gravely. But there are still many who remember the war, and there are many resentments still lingering. Without you, they would surface again. Even I do not think I could work comfortably with fellow council members I once fought against without your mediation, and the younger generation's loyalty to the Emperor is absolute. If you left, the council would not have the authority to rule Quadria without you. A return to civil war in some form would be inevitable. That is why, humbly, I suggest you order the executions of these humans immediately. Whoa, 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 Travis shouted. If you feel that strongly about it, sure, keep him. We'll happily leave without him. I'm afraid that is not good enough, Zoroff said. From what you have said, if you brought word of our situation back to Earth, your government might feel compelled by your laws to send people to retrieve the Emperor by force. We cannot take that risk. I apologize, but 4 lives are a small price to pay to ensure the safety of an entire planet. Well, when you put it like that, Pierce said, I suppose I don't really have an argument against that. Travis looked at him, then back at Zoroff. This man does not represent me. I have plenty of arguments for why you shouldn't kill us. In fact, it could take years just for me to explain them all properly. Hold it, Joe said. Enough. No one is killing anyone. No, Zoroff, I mean it. I'm putting my foot down as Emperor. We'll find some way to sort this out without any executions. Zoroff tipped his head from side to side, which was the Quadrian equivalent of a shrug. As the Emperor wishes, your decisions have always proved wise. Actually, Zoroff, I think in this case you've been wiser than me. You decided Quadrians could be trusted with my identity when I was too afraid to tell them the truth. That's the solution. I'm glad the Council's handling of your identity meets with your approval, but I do not see the relevance to this situation. Under Union law, humans can't contact pre-interstellar species, but that doesn't apply to Quadrians. You have space travel. It's also illegal to covertly influence the culture or politics of other species without their knowledge or consent. Basically, they made a law against psyops back in the day after some government agencies were caught doing some shady stuff. That's what they'd get me on. But you're not an uncontacted species, so I can reveal my identity to you. And once I've done that, what I'm doing is no longer covert. So as long as the people of Quadria want me to remain Emperor, Earth can't touch me. You'd actually have diplomatic immunity as a foreign head of state, in fact, pointed out Haskell, trying to be helpful and not dead. So it's simple, Joe said. We keep them here until the announcement is made, and then they go home. Yeah, about that, said Travis. Can you help us out? Oh, you don't need to be helped out any longer, Joe told him. You've always had the power to go back to Earth. Seriously, your ship's been fixed for ages. Then why didn't you tell us before? Well, to be honest, I thought you'd figure it out for yourselves, but apparently not. After I found out you were bouncing around Quadria causing trouble, I had some of my guys go out, find where you'd hidden your ship, and fix it for you. I didn't want to tell you in case you started asking questions about me. I was hoping you'd just accept you had a lucky break and go home. But in the 2 years you spent trying to fix your ship, it never occurred to you to go back and check on it. Ships don't usually fix themselves, pointed out Travis. Okay, well, I'm not sure whether to be happy or annoyed that we wasted all that time and, went through all that suffering and mortal peril. But I guess at least we can go back to Earth now. Yeah, said Pierce. There's no place like home.